Mark looked at his watch, annoyed that his wife was taking too long to sign away her life. He told her she was dead weight. He told her she was the anchor dragging him down to the bottom of the social ladder. He laughed when she asked how she would survive without him. He walked out of that courtroom feeling like a free man, convinced he had just discarded a worthless asset. He had no idea that the ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when Sarah received a phone call that would change history. Mark thought he was divorcing a waitress. He didn't know he was divorcing the sole heir to the largest real estate empire in New York City. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it hammered against the pavement like it had a personal vendetta against anyone foolish enough to be outside. Sarah Reynolds stood on the curb outside the King County Superior Court, her beige trench coat soaked through to the lining. She held a manila envelope against her chest, the only thing she had left to her name. Inside were the divorce decree and a check for $5,000. Mark called it a settlement. Sarah knew what it really was. Severance pay. Just an hour ago, inside courtroom 4B, Mark Reynolds, a man she had supported through law school, through his unpaid internships, and through the death of his mother, had refused to look her in the eye. He sat next to his high-powered attorney, looking crisp in a tailored navy suit that Sarah had ironed for him just 2 days prior. My client feels that the marriage has irretrievably broken down due to fundamental incompatibility regarding ambition and lifestyle, Mark's lawyer had droned. Ambition. That was the word Mark loved lately. Since he had landed the junior partner position at Stratton and Oakmont, a boutique corporate firm in downtown Seattle, he had become obsessed with optics. Sarah, with her job as an archivist at the local library and her preference for quiet nights in, didn't fit the narrative of a rising legal star. As Sarah stood in the rain, a silver Mercedes G-Wagon pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Mark was in the driver's seat. He didn't unlock the doors. "You need a ride to the bus station?" Mark asked. His voice was devoid of the warmth it held when he proposed to her in a cramped studio apartment 7 years ago. "No, Mark, I'm fine," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly from the cold. "Look, Sarah," Mark sighed, gripping the leather steering wheel. "Don't make this a tragedy. You're a simple girl. You always were. You'll be happier back in whatever small life you settle into. Chloe and I have a gala tonight. I really need to get going. Chloe Baxter, the daughter of the senior partner at Mark's firm. She was 24, sharp-tongued, and wore dresses that cost more than Sarah's annual salary. Sarah had found the texts 3 months ago. When she confronted Mark, he hadn't even apologized. He had just looked relieved. Finally, his face had said, "An excuse to upgrade." "Go to your gala, Mark," Sarah whispered. "Take the $5,000, Sarah. Buy some new clothes. Maybe fix your hair," he sneered, rolling the window up before she could respond. The tires screeched against the wet asphalt as he sped off, splashing muddy water onto her shoes. Sarah watched the taillights disappear into the grey mist. She was 31 years old. She had no parents. They had died in a car accident when she was 4, leaving her to bounce between foster homes in rural Oregon until she aged out of the system. She had no degree, having quit college to work 2 jobs so Mark could study for the bar exam. She had no apartment. Mark had kept the lease on their downtown condo because it was closer to work. She walked 3 blocks to a grimy diner on 3rd Avenue, the neon open sign flickering with a dying buzz. She ordered a black coffee because it was the cheapest thing on the menu. She sat in the booth, staring at the Formica table, trying to calculate how long $5,000 would last in a city where rent averaged $3,000 a month. Her phone buzzed. It was a restricted number. She ignored it. It buzzed again immediately. She picked it up, her voice raspy. "Hello? Is this Mrs. Sarah Reynolds, born Sarah Ann Miller?" The voice on the other end was deep, authoritative, and distinctly British. "Yes. Who is this?" "I don't have any money for bill collectors right now," she said, feeling the tears prick at her eyes. "Mrs. Reynolds, my name is Arthur Sterling. I am the senior executor for the Blackwood Vance Trust, based in Manhattan. I have been trying to locate you for 6 months. It is a matter of extreme urgency regarding your biological lineage." Sarah frowned. "I don't have a lineage. I was a foster kid. You have the wrong person." "We do not make mistakes, Mrs. Reynolds," Arthur Sterling said, his tone softening slightly. "We utilized a private genetic genealogy database after a match was flagged in a 23andMe test you took 4 years ago. Are you currently in a secure location?" "I'm in a diner." "Stay there. I have an associate, Mr. Henderson, 2 blocks away. He is coming to collect you. Do not leave." "I'm not going anywhere with a stranger," Sarah snapped, about to hang up. "Sarah," the man's voice dropped an octave, commanding absolute attention. "Your grandmother was Eleanor van der Hoven. She passed away 3 days ago. You are her only living relative. If you hang up this phone, you will be walking away from a legacy that shaped the skyline of New York City." Sarah froze. Eleanor van der Hoven. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like something she had read in a history book or a Forbes article. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am the man who is about to explain why you just became the wealthiest woman in this room. Please wait for Mr. Henderson." 20 minutes later, Sarah wasn't in a diner anymore. She was sitting in the back of a black Lincoln Town car, gliding toward the private airfield at Boeing Field. The man who picked her up, Mr. Henderson, was a mountain of a human being. 6'5", wearing a suit that cost more than Mark's car, and completely silent. He had handed her a non-disclosure agreement the moment she entered the car. She signed it, mostly because she was in shock. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, clutching her ragged purse. "New York, Mom," Henderson said, his eyes scanning the road via the rearview mirror. "Mr. Sterling is waiting at the Plaza Hotel." The flight was a blur of luxury Sarah couldn't comprehend. A private Gulfstream, G650. Champagne she didn't drink. Leather seats that smelled like money. She spent the 5-hour flight staring out the window, wondering if this was a psychotic break. Maybe the stress of the divorce had finally snapped her mind. Maybe she was actually still sitting in that diner, hallucinating. They landed in Teterboro and were helicoptered to Manhattan. By 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sarah was walking into the penthouse suite of the Plaza Hotel. Standing by the fireplace was an older man, perhaps in his 70s, with silver hair and a posture that suggested he had carried heavy burdens for a long time. This was Arthur Sterling. "Sarah," he said, not offering a handshake but bowing his head slightly. "Thank you for coming." "You said my grandmother was Eleanor van der Hoven," Sarah said, her voice stronger now. The adrenaline was kicking in. "Who was she?" Arthur gestured to the coffee table. It was covered in thick binders, blueprints, and a stack of legal documents. "Eleanor was a titan," Arthur began, pouring a glass of water and handing it to her. "In the 1960s, she began buying distressed properties in Manhattan under the shell company Blackwood Real Estate. She was ruthless, brilliant, and incredibly private. She had a daughter, your mother, Catherine, who ran away at 18 because she couldn't handle Eleanor's controlling nature. Eleanor cut her off. She never knew Catherine died in that car accident until we found you." Sarah felt a pang in her chest. "She didn't care to look?" "She cared too much," Arthur corrected. "She was afraid of what she would find. But 5 years ago, diagnosed with terminal cancer, she instructed my firm to find her heir. We found you. But Eleanor, she was eccentric. She wanted to watch you from afar. She wanted to know if you had her grit. She watched me? Sarah felt a chill. She watched me struggle. She watched me scrub floors and eat instant noodles while she lived like this. She wanted to ensure the fortune wouldn't destroy you, Arthur said grimly. And she wanted to ensure it wouldn't go to your husband. Sarah's head snapped up. Mark? Arthur pulled a folder from the stack. Eleanor knew about Mark. She had private investigators tracking him for 3 years. She knew about the affair with Chloe Baxter before you did. She knew he was using you to pay his way through law school. Eleanor's will had a strict stipulation. You could not inherit a single dime until Mark Reynolds was legally out of your life. Arthur slid a paper across the table. It was a copy of the divorce decree Sarah had signed just hours ago. How do you have this? Sarah gasped. We have eyes everywhere, Sarah. The moment that judge stamped this document, the trust unlocked. You are officially divorced. Mark has no claim to your assets acquired after the dissolution of marriage. Assets? Sarah repeated. What assets? Arthur walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Central Park and the glittering skyline of New York City. He gestured to the view. Do you see that tower on 57th Street? The slender glass one? Yes. That is the Vance Tower. It's yours. Do you see the historic Blackwood building near Grand Central? That is yours. You own 12 residential skyscrapers in Manhattan, a commercial complex in London, a vineyard in Bordeaux, and a controlling stake in Horizon Development. Arthur turned back to her, his eyes serious. The portfolio is valued at approximately $1.3 billion. And as of 4 p.m. today, you are the sole owner, chairwoman, and CEO. Sarah dropped onto the velvet sofa. The room spun. 1.3 billion. It was a number that didn't make sense. It was abstract. Why didn't she tell me? Sarah wept, the emotion of the day finally breaking her. I was so alone. She was protecting the empire, Arthur said gently. If Mark knew, he would have fought for half. He would have dragged the divorce out for years. He would have drained the accounts. Eleanor needed him gone. She needed you to be free. Arthur sat opposite her. But there is a catch. Sarah wiped her eyes. Of course there is. The board of directors at Horizon Development, they are sharks. They expected the company to go to Sebastian Vance, Eleanor's step-nephew. He is a dangerous man. He believes the empire is his birthright. If he finds out you are inexperienced, he will eat you alive. He will try to declare you incompetent and seize control. Arthur leaned in. We have to keep your identity secret for 30 days. You need to learn how to be a billionaire, Sarah. You need to learn how to walk, talk, and think like a Vanderhoven. If you fail, Sebastian wins. And Mark, well, if Mark finds out before the 30-day contestability period of the divorce is up, he might try to find a loophole to annul the divorce and claim he was defrauded. Sarah stood up. She walked to the window. She looked at the city lights. She thought about Mark's laugh as he drove away in his Mercedes. She thought about Chloe Baxter's smug face on Instagram. She thought about the customers at the diner who tipped her in quarters. She turned back to Arthur, her eyes dry and hard. "Teach me," she said. "I want to bury them, all of them." Arthur smiled for the first time. "Welcome home, Ms. Vanderhoven." The next 3 weeks were not a vacation. They were a boot camp designed to dismantle Sarah Reynolds and reconstruct her as Sarah Vanderhoven. Arthur Sterling was a taskmaster. He moved Sarah into a secure estate in the Hamptons, far away from the prying eyes of Manhattan paparazzi and, more importantly, away from anyone who might recognize her as the woman who used to buy day-old bread to save 50 cents. Her days began at 5 a.m. "Posture, Sarah," Arthur would bark as she walked down the grand staircase. "You walk like you are apologizing for taking up space. A van der Hoven walks like she owns the ground beneath her feet, because usually she does." She spent 4 hours a day with a team of forensic accountants. They taught her how to read a balance sheet, how to spot a shell company, and how to identify tax loopholes that legal firms, like the one Mark worked for, used to hide assets. It was ironic. She had spent years listening to Mark practice his legal jargon, feeling inferior because she didn't understand it. Now, she was learning that half of what he said was fluff designed to intimidate. Mark wasn't smart, Sarah realized aloud one afternoon, staring at a complex merger document. He was just loud. "Precisely," Arthur nodded, sipping his tea. "Volume is the refuge of the incompetent. Power is silent." Then came the physical transformation. A team of stylists, sworn to secrecy, descended upon the estate. They cut her long, frizzy brown hair into a sharp, angular bob that framed her face. They dyed it a rich, dark espresso. They took away her polyester blends and replaced them with structured blazers, silk blouses, and Italian leather heels that clicked ominously on the marble floors. When Sarah looked in the mirror after 2 weeks, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The tired, red-rimmed eyes of the rejected wife were gone. In their place was a cool, calculating gaze. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. But the hardest lesson was the emotional one. One evening, Arthur placed her cell phone on the table. It had been turned off since she arrived. "Turn it on," Arthur commanded. Sarah hesitated. She knew what was waiting. She pressed the power button. The phone vibrated violently on the mahogany table for 5 minutes straight. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. Most were from creditors or her old boss at the library. But there were 3 from Mark. Arthur nodded. "Play them." Sarah pressed speaker. Mark's voice filled the opulent room. "Sarah, it's Mark. Look, I can't find my grey cufflinks. Did you pack them in that box of junk you took? I need them for a dinner with the senior partners tonight. Check your stuff and call me back. Don't be petty about this." The second message was from 2 days later. "Sarah, seriously? You're ignoring me? I'm trying to be civil here. Also, the electric bill for the condo came in, and it's for the last month you were here. I'm not paying for your hot showers. Send me the $50 via Venmo. Today." Sarah felt the old rage bubbling up. The audacity. He had just kicked her out of her life, and he was chasing her for $50. "Do you want to reply?" Arthur asked quietly. "I want to scream at him," Sarah said, her hand shaking. "I want to tell him I could buy his entire firm and turn it into a parking lot." "And if you do that," Arthur said, his voice hard, "you lose everything. The moment you engage, you reveal your hand. He doesn't know you have power. That is your greatest weapon. Indifference, Sarah. Indifference is the only revenge that matters right now." Sarah took a deep breath. She looked at the phone. She looked at Mark's contact photo, a picture of him smiling on a vacation she had paid for. She deleted the messages. She didn't block him. Blocking him showed she cared. She just deleted them. "Good," Arthur said. "Now, let's discuss Sebastian Vance." Arthur pulled up a projection on the wall. A man appeared on the screen. He was strikingly handsome in a severe way. Sandy blonde hair, ice blue eyes, and a smile that didn't reach them. He was 35, educated at Oxford, and currently serving as the acting COO of Horizon Development. "Sebastian is your cousin by marriage," Arthur explained. "He has been running the company since Eleanor got sick. He has embezzled approximately $40 million in the last 5 years through consulting fees paid to offshore accounts. We have the proof, but we haven't used it yet. Why not? Because if we arrest him now, the stock price tanks. We need you to take control of the board first. You need to oust him publicly on grounds of incompetence, not just theft. You need to humiliate him, Sarah. If you don't break his reputation, he will start a rival firm and take half our clients. Sarah studied Sebastian's face. He looked like every bully she had ever known. He looked like Mark, just with more money. Tomorrow is the monthly board meeting, Arthur said. Everyone expects Arthur Sterling to announce the sale of the company or the appointment of Sebastian as CEO. Instead, I will be introducing the new chairwoman. Sarah stood up, smoothing her skirt. Let's go to New York. The headquarters of Horizon Development occupied the top 20 floors of the Blackwood Building in Midtown Manhattan. The boardroom was on the 80th floor, a glass-walled fortress in the sky. At 9:30 a.m. sharp, the 12 members of the board were seated around a table made of reclaimed black oak. The atmosphere was jovial. They were all men, mostly in their 50s and 60s, laughing and checking their watches. At the head of the table sat Sebastian Vance. He was leaning back in the chair that used to belong to Eleanor, his feet casually crossed. He looked like a king waiting for his coronation. "All right, gentlemen," Sebastian said, his British accent crisp. "Let's get this formality over with. Where is old Arthur? Probably stuck in traffic with his walker." The room erupted in polite, sycophantic laughter. "I'm sure he's coming to read the will." One board member, a heavy-set man named Jenkins, chuckled. "Hopefully Eleanor left her cats to someone else, so we can finally liquidate the residential assets. The market is hot." "We're not liquidating, Jenkins," Sebastian corrected with a smirk. "We're rebranding. Vance Global has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" The double doors at the end of the room swung open. The laughter died instantly. Arthur Sterling walked in, looking anything but frail. He carried a briefcase and walked with a purposeful stride. But the room didn't look at him. They looked at the woman walking a step ahead of him. Sarah wore a white tailored suit that seemed to glow against the dark wood of the room. Her hair was sharp, her makeup flawless, her expression unreadable. She didn't look at anyone. She walked straight to the head of the table. Sebastian didn't stand up. He stared at her, confused. "Arthur," Sebastian said, a tight smile on his face. "You brought an assistant?" "We have plenty." Sarah stopped at the head of the table, standing right next to Sebastian. She looked down at him. "You're in my seat," she said. Her voice was calm, low, and terrifyingly steady. Sebastian blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said," Sarah repeated, louder this time, "you are in my seat. Move." The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Arthur cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce Ms. Sarah van der Hoven, granddaughter of Eleanor van der Hoven, sole heir to the Blackwood Vance Trust, and, as of yesterday, the majority shareholder and chairwoman of this company." Shock rippled through the room. Whispers exploded. Sebastian's face went pale, then red. He stood up slowly, towering over Sarah. He tried to use his height to intimidate her, a trick Mark used to do. "This is a joke," Sebastian spat. "Eleanor had no heir. She was a barren old witch. This is some fraud you've cooked up, Arthur." Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She maintained eye contact. "Mr. Sterling has the DNA results and the birth certificates in that briefcase," Sarah said, "along with the new bylaws. But we can discuss that later. Right now, Sebastian, I'd like to discuss the Project Orion accounts." Sebastian froze. His eyes widened imperceptibly. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah pulled a single sheet of paper from her folder and slid it across the table. Project Orion, a consulting firm in the Cayman Islands. You've authorized 12 payments of $3 million each to them over the last 2 years for structural analysis. The funny thing is, Sarah turned to the rest of the board, I had my team look into Project Orion. Their registered address is a P.O. box inside a surf shop, and the sole signatory is a shell company owned by you. The board members gasped. Jenkins looked at Sebastian with horror. That's a lie, Sebastian hissed, but sweat was forming on his brow. Is it? Sarah asked. I'm calling for a forensic audit of all departments, effective immediately, and until that audit is complete, Sebastian, you are suspended from your duties as COO. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the building. Sebastian looked around the room, looking for allies, but the board members, sharks who smelled blood, were already looking away from him, distancing themselves. They sensed the power shift. Sebastian leaned in close to Sarah, his voice a venomous whisper only she could hear. You think you've won? You're a street rat in a designer suit. I know where you came from. I know about the waitress job. I know about the pathetic husband who dumped you. You think you can play in the big leagues? I will destroy you. Sarah smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. You can try, Sebastian. But unlike you, I have nothing to lose. I've already lost it all. You, on the other hand, you have a lot of yachts to sell. She pointed to the door. Get out. Sebastian grabbed his jacket, his face twisted in hate. He stormed out of the room, slamming the doors behind him. Sarah didn't watch him go. She sat down in the leather chair at the head of the table. She looked at the 12 men staring at her with fear and respect. Now, Sarah said, opening her binder. Let's talk about the Seattle expansion. I have some personal business there I'd like to attend to. The twist, however, came 10 minutes later. As the meeting proceeded, Sarah's phone, which lay face up on the table, lit up with a news notification. It was a local Seattle business blog. Rising star. Mark Reynolds, appointed as lead counsel for Vance Global's new West Coast acquisition. Sarah froze. She looked at the screen. Vance Global. That was the name Sebastian had just used. Arthur saw it too. He leaned over, whispering urgently. It seems Sebastian has been planning his exit strategy for months. He's setting up a rival firm, and he just hired your ex-husband to lead his legal team. Sarah felt a sick feeling in her stomach. Sebastian didn't just know about Mark. He had recruited him. They were teaming up. Sarah looked at the headline again. Mark Reynolds, Sebastian Vance. The 2 men who hated her most were now allies. She closed the binder. Gentlemen, she addressed the board. Change of plans. We aren't just expanding to Seattle. We're going to war. Seattle had not changed, but Sarah had. 2 months had passed since the boardroom coup in New York. In that time, Sarah had solidified her grip on the company, purging Sebastian's loyalists and rebranding the conglomerate simply as the Van der Hoeven Group. She returned to Seattle on a rainy Tuesday, but this time she didn't arrive on a Greyhound bus. She arrived in a convoy of armored SUVs heading straight to the Four Seasons. She rented the entire top floor. Her target was the Emerald Charity Gala, the most prestigious event of the year. Mark Reynolds was the keynote speaker. He was being celebrated as the young visionary of the year, largely due to the hype Sebastian Vance had generated around their new venture, Vance Global. They were planning to bulldoze the historic waterfront district, including the library where Sarah used to work, to build luxury condos. Sarah stood in her hotel suite, looking at the invitation. Are you ready? Arthur asked. He looked concerned. Mark will be there. Chloe will be there. It's going to be visceral." Sarah turned. She was wearing a custom-made gown of midnight blue velvet, dripping with sapphires that had belonged to Eleanor. The dress was armor. It screamed power. "I'm not afraid of them, Arthur. I'm just afraid I might enjoy this too much." The ballroom was glittering. Seattle's elite mingled, holding flutes of champagne. Mark Reynolds stood near the stage, looking triumphant. He had his arm around Chloe Baxter, who was wearing a flashy, sequined gold dress. "You're the king of the city, babe," Chloe cooed, sipping her drink. "We're just getting started," Mark beamed, adjusting his bow tie. "Once we secure the waterfront bid tonight, I'll be a partner at Vance Global. Sebastian promised." Suddenly, the room went quiet. The chatter died down like a flame starved of oxygen. Heads turned toward the grand staircase. Sarah descended slowly. She didn't look at the floor. She looked straight ahead. The crowd parted for her, sensing someone of immense importance, though few recognized her immediately. The haircut, the couture, the jewelry. It was a disguise of wealth. Mark frowned, squinting. "Who is that?" Chloe scoffed. "Probably some Hollywood actress. Look at those sapphires. They look fake." Sarah walked straight to the VIP table, reserved for Phoenix Holdings, the mysterious company that had been outbidding Vance Global all week. She sat down, her back to Mark. The auction for the waterfront district began. The auctioneer started the bidding at $20 million. "25, Mark shouted, raising his paddle. He looked around the room, daring anyone to challenge him. $30 million, a proxy bidder for a tech company called out. $40 million, Mark countered aggressively. Sebastian had authorized him to go up to $60 million. "The bid is $40 million to Mr. Reynolds," the auctioneer said. "Going once?" Sarah didn't raise a paddle. She simply raised her hand, signaling her waiter. He handed her a microphone. $100 million, Sarah said. Her voice was calm, amplified through the speakers, echoing off the walls. The room gasped. $100 million? For a plot of land worth 50? Mark froze. He knew that voice. It was impossible, but he knew it. He turned slowly, his face draining of color. Sarah stood up and turned around to face him. The silence was deafening. Mark stared. Chloe stared. The entire room watched the standoff. "Sarah?" Mark whispered, his voice cracking. She didn't smile. She looked at him with the cold curiosity of a scientist examining a bug. "Hello, Mark," she said into the mic. "I believe I have the floor." She turned back to the auctioneer. $100 million, paid in cash, tonight. The gavel banged down. "Sold to the lady in blue." Mark stumbled forward, pushing past a waiter. "Sarah, what is this? Who are you with?" Sarah signaled her security detail. 2 massive guards stepped in front of Mark, blocking him. She leaned in, close enough that only he could hear. "I'm not with anyone, Mark. I am the money." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, humiliated, while the photographer's flashes exploded around him. The next morning, Mark Reynolds was a man on the edge of a nervous breakdown. The press was having a field day. "Mystery IRS humiliates local lawyer. Who is Sarah van der Hoven?" Mark paced his office at Vance Global. Sebastian Vance was on the screen of his laptop, video conferencing from London. Sebastian looked furious. "You told me she was a nobody," Sebastian screamed. "You told me she was a waitress who read too many books. She just cost us the waterfront deal." "I didn't know," Mark yelled back, running a hand through his hair. "She was poor. I paid her bills. I bought her groceries. How the hell did she get $100 million? She's Eleanor's granddaughter, you idiot!" Sebastian spat. "I tried to tell you, but you were too busy staring at your own reflection. She is the van der Hoven heir." Mark stopped pacing. He sank into his chair. The billionaire. A slow, twisted smile spread across Mark's face. The panic was replaced by a sudden, sickening greed. "Wait," Mark said. "Sebastian, we didn't sign a prenup." So, Mark laughed, a manic sound. "In Washington state, assets acquired during the marriage are community property. But more importantly, if I can prove she defrauded me, hid assets to induce a divorce, I can get the settlement overturned. I can claim half." "She inherited it after you signed the papers," Sebastian said. "Did she?" Mark narrowed his eyes. "Or did she know about it before? If she knew, and she didn't disclose it during the proceedings, that's perjury. That's fraud. I can sue her for half the empire." Sebastian paused. He saw the utility in this. "Go see her. Wear a wire. Get her to admit she knew before the divorce was final." Mark requested a meeting. To his surprise, Sarah accepted. She invited him to the Blackwood Tower, Seattle, a building he didn't even know she owned. Mark walked into the conference room. He expected lawyers. Instead, it was just Sarah, sitting at the end of a long glass table. She was looking out the window at the rain. "You look good, Sarah," Mark said, putting on his best charming smile. He tapped the hidden recorder in his jacket pocket. "Sit down, Mark," she said, without turning around. Mark sat. "Look, I know things ended badly. I was stressed. Chloe," she meant nothing. "I was confused." Sarah turned her chair. Her face was blank. "You told me I was an anchor, Mark. You said I was dead weight." "I was trying to push you to be better," Mark lied smoothly. "And look at you now. You're incredible. But Sarah, we have unfinished business. You hid this from me. You knew you were rich, and you let me divorce you for $5,000. "I didn't know until the ink was dry," Sarah said calmly. "I don't believe you," Mark pressed, trying to get the confession. "Come on, Sarah. You knew. You played me. Just admit it, and maybe we can settle this privately. We're still husband and wife in the eyes of God, right?" Sarah pressed a button on the table. A section of the wall slid open to reveal a screen. "Arthur, did you get that?" Sarah asked. Mark spun around. Arthur Sterling was on the screen. "Clear as day, Ms. Vanderhoven," Arthur said. "Attempted extortion." Sarah stood up and walked toward Mark. She tossed a folder onto the table. "You think you're here to trap me, Mark. You're not the hunter. You're the bait." Mark opened the folder. It wasn't about the divorce. It was a series of bank transfers. "What is this?" Mark asked. "Sebastian Vance has been embezzling money from the company for years," Sarah explained. "But he needed a fall guy, someone to sign the checks for the new shell companies, someone ambitious and stupid." Mark's hand started to shake as he read the documents. His signature was on everything. "You signed the incorporation papers for Vance Global without reading the appendices, didn't you?" Sarah asked softly. "Sebastian listed you as the sole, financially liable officer. All the debt? It's yours. All the missing money from the London accounts? It was transferred to an account in your name yesterday." "No," Mark whispered. He said those were standard liability waivers." "He framed you, Mark," Sarah said mercilessly. "Sebastian knew I was coming for him. So he threw you to the wolves. He stole $40 million, put it in your name, and then tipped off the FBI this morning." Mark stood up, knocking his chair over. "The FBI?" "They're in the lobby," Sarah said, checking her watch. "I own the building, so I asked them to wait 5 minutes. I wanted to see the look on your face when you realized that the dead-weight wife you threw away is the only person who could have saved you." "Sarah, please!" Mark fell to his knees, grabbing her hand. The arrogance was gone. He was a terrified child. "Help me! I'll do anything! I'll testify against him! Don't let them take me!" Sarah pulled her hand away. She looked down at him, remembering the rain on her face outside the courthouse. "You wanted to be a big shot, Mark. You wanted to be in the history books." She walked to the door. "Now you will be. United States versus Mark Reynolds has a nice ring to it." Sarah walked out. As the heavy doors clicked shut, she heard Mark screaming her name. Then she heard the elevator ding and the heavy footsteps of federal agents moving down the hall. She didn't look back. She had one more monster to slay. With Mark Reynolds denied bail and awaiting trial in a federal detention center, the immediate ghost of Sarah's past was locked away. But the architect of her misery, Sebastian Vance, remained free. In fact, he was thriving. From his base of operations in London, Sebastian had spun Mark's arrest into a massive public relations victory. He released statements painting himself as the ethical whistleblower who had discovered Mark's financial irregularities and heroically reported him to the authorities. The business world, always eager to back a winner, ate it up. Sebastian was being hailed as a paragon of corporate integrity. Emboldened by this success, Sebastian was preparing for his endgame, listing Vance Global on the London Stock Exchange. It was the move that would cement his power. Analysts predicted the initial public offering, IPO, would raise billions, giving him the capital he needed to finally crush Sarah's empire and buy back the Blackwood properties he believed were rightfully his. Sarah sat in her office in New York, the lights of the city glittering below her like diamonds on black velvet. On the wall-sized screen, Sebastian was giving an interview on a major financial news network. He looked relaxed, charming, and utterly untouchable. "It's a tragedy, really," Sebastian said to the interviewer, his face a mask of feigned sympathy. "Mark was a troubled man. I tried to mentor him, but greed is a powerful drug. At Vance Global, we value transparency above all else. That's why our investors are so confident in our launch next week." Arthur Sterling, standing by the door, muted the television with a click of the remote. His face was grim. "He's slippery, Sarah. We have evidence he set Mark up, but it's circumstantial. Mark's signature is on everything. Sebastian kept his hands clean. If that IPO goes through tomorrow, he'll be too big to touch. He will use that capital to wage a war of attrition against us that could last for years." Sarah stared at the blank screen, her reflection ghosted on the glass. She didn't look worried. She looked focused. "He thinks he's playing chess, Arthur," she said softly. "But he forgets that I own the board." "What do you mean?" Arthur asked, stepping closer. Sarah turned her chair to face him. She tapped her tablet, bringing up a complex web of financial charts and corporate structures. Sebastian needed massive capital to launch Vance Global so quickly, Sarah explained, tracing a line on the screen. He was desperate. He needed liquidity to pay for the marketing, the bribes, the infrastructure. He secured 3 major angel investors to back his initial operations: Apex Capital, Blue Sky Holdings, and the Chimera Group. "Yes," Arthur nodded, recognizing the names. "Shadowy private equity firms. My team tried to find out who runs them, but they are buried under layers of anonymity in the Cayman Islands and Singapore. We couldn't pierce the corporate veil." Sarah smiled, a genuine, dangerous smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You couldn't find the owners, Arthur, because I didn't want you to." Arthur's jaw dropped slightly. He looked from the screen to Sarah, realizing the magnitude of what she was implying. "Sarah, surely you didn't? When I first inherited the money, you told me to learn the system," Sarah said, standing up and walking to the window. "I realized Sebastian's ego was his weakness. He was desperate for money to start his rival firm, and he was too arrogant to believe anyone would trick him. So I created 3 shell companies. I funded them with personal assets I liquidated from the European portfolio. And then, through intermediaries, I offered Sebastian the money he needed. She turned back to Arthur, her voice steel. I am Apex. I am Blue Sky. I am Chimera. I own 80% of his debt. I am the majority shareholder of the company he thinks is his. I funded his dream just so I could be the one to turn it into a nightmare. He doesn't know, Arthur whispered, looking at her with a mix of fear and awe. He never checked, Sarah shrugged. He was so happy to find investors who didn't ask difficult questions that he didn't look at the source. He assumed he was charming for them. He didn't realize he was selling his soul to the woman he hates. So what is the play? Arthur asked, his investigative instinct kicking in. He's launching the IPO in London tomorrow, Sarah said, checking her watch. Prepare the jet, Arthur. I think it's time for an emergency shareholder meeting. The launch party for Vance Global was held at the Shard in London, occupying the highest event space in the city. It was an event of excessive opulence, designed to signal to the world that Sebastian Vance had arrived. Champagne flowed from crystal fountains, A-list celebrities mingled with bankers, and a string quartet played soft classical music in the corner. Sebastian Vance stood at a podium, bathed in a spotlight, basking in the applause of the room. He looked out at the sea of faces, feeling invincible. Today, Sebastian boomed into the microphone, his voice echoing through the hall, we mark the beginning of a new era, an era free from the dusty old ways of the past. We are the future of real estate. He raised his glass high. To Vance Global! To Vance Global! The crowd roared in unison, glasses clinking. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the hall swung open with a loud crash. The sound cut through the celebration like a gunshot. The music stopped. The chatter died. Heads turned. Sarah van der Hoven walked in. She wasn't wearing a gown this time. She was dressed for a funeral or an execution. She wore a sharp, black business suit that looked like armor. Her hair was slicked back, her face devoid of emotion. She was flanked by 4 stone-faced lawyers and Arthur Sterling, who carried a thick leather portfolio. Sebastian froze on stage, his glass hovering halfway to his mouth. He squinted against the stage lights. Sarah, Sebastian sneered, recovering quickly. He laughed into the microphone. Did you come to beg for a job? I might need a janitor for the lobby. The crowd chuckled nervously, sensing the tension but unsure how to react. Sarah didn't speak. She walked steadily up the aisle, the sound of her heels rhythmic and ominous on the marble floor. She climbed the stairs to the stage. She walked right up to Sebastian, who towered over her, but seemed to shrink in her presence. She took the microphone from the stand, ignoring him completely. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah addressed the room, her voice calm and amplified. I apologize for the interruption, but as the majority owner of Vance Global, I have an administrative announcement to make. Sebastian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Majority owner. You're delusional. Security. Get this woman off my stage. 2 guards stepped forward, but Sarah's lawyers held up a hand, presenting a court order stamped with the seal of the High Court of Justice. The guards hesitated. Actually, Sarah said, pulling a document from her jacket pocket, I control Apex Capital, Blue Sky Holdings, and the Chimera Group. Collectively, these entities hold 80% of the equity in this venture, which means, Sebastian, I own the stage you're standing on. I own the champagne you're drinking, and I own the company you're trying to sell. She shoved the document into Sebastian's chest. He grabbed it, his eyes scanning the pages frantically. He saw the signatures. He saw the routing numbers. He saw the truth. His face went grey. His hands started to tremble violently. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. This is entrapment, he whispered, his voice cracking. It's business, Sarah said coldly. And as the majority shareholder, I am exercising my right to restructure the leadership immediately. She turned to the crowd, who were now watching in stunned silence, phones recording every second. Effective immediately, Vance Global is dissolving its independent operations and will be absorbed into the Van der Hoeven Group. All assets will be seized to pay off the outstanding debt. She turned slowly to face Sebastian. And as for the CEO, you are terminated. For gross negligence, failure to conduct due diligence, and financial incompetence. Sebastian lunged at her, his face twisted in a mask of pure hate. You witch! I built this! You can't take it! Security guards, Sarah's security guards, intercepted him effortlessly. They pinned his arms behind his back, forcing him to his knees. You built a nothing, Sarah said, looking down at him. You borrowed bricks from a house you tried to burn down. And now the rent is due. I'll sue you! Sebastian screamed as they dragged him off the stage. I'll kill you! This isn't over! Get in line, Sarah muttered. She watched him get dragged out the exit, kicking and screaming, stripping him of the last shred of his dignity. The room was silent. The investors, the press, the elite, they all looked at Sarah with a mixture of fear and respect. She didn't gloat. She didn't cheer. She simply adjusted her jacket and looked out at the crowd. Please enjoy the champagne, she told them. It's on me. As she walked off the stage, Arthur met her at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see Eleanor's granddaughter. He saw Sarah. Are you okay? He asked. Sarah looked at the empty stage where Sebastian had stood just moments ago. Yes, she said. I finally am. And that is how Sarah Reynolds died, and Sarah Van der Hoeven was born. She learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you are just waiting for the chance to leave you behind. Mark thought he was discarding a broken woman, but he was actually releasing a dragon. In the end, he didn't just lose a wife, he lost the world. Sarah proved that the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting. It's succeeding so wildly that your enemies become footnotes in your biography. It makes you wonder, if you found out your partner was secretly worth billions the day after you left them, would you try to win them back, or would you run? What do you think? Did Mark deserve 8 years in prison, or was Sarah too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. Type Queen if you think Sarah did the right thing. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, betrayal, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next part of our drama series. We have a crazy story coming next week about a billionaire who faked his death to test his children. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching. And remember, be careful who you step on today. They might own the sidewalk tomorrow. See you next time.